Last lecture. It's three chapters out of the Healy book, and we'll see what we get here. I'm not exactly sure what we're looking at, but there's three different chapters. It should be interesting for me because I haven't really been through this for a while. So the first thing we're going to talk about is personality and individual differences, how different types of people respond to diversity. And there we go. Freud felt that we have two motivations pulling on us, giving us the drive in everything that we do. We have life forces that send us to work and get us through the day, and this is known as eros. And we have death forces that pull us to our ultimate grave, or thanatos. And of course, you may hear these two terms. Eros, of course, we think of as passion. Thanatos has to do with death. And you may hear these sometime in the future. And this is probably what they're talking about. They're probably talking about Freud. Most of us spend our lives with a happy, healthy excess of eros and just a little thanatos warning us where we eventually will end up. It's thanatos that tells us, if I keep drinking, then I'm going to die young. That's the thanatos coming out. But most of the time we think, well, I'm indestructible and I will live forever. Those with not enough eros and an excess of thanatos become depressed and eventually may commit suicide. Our balance of thanatos and eros is heavily influenced by our childhood experiences and conflicts that we encounter that determines our personality and ultimately our biases toward people who are different and preferences for people who are similar. With this topic, psychodynamic theory maintains three premises. Humans have a disposition to be hostile, especially in the face of real or perceived danger. Hostility may come from economic or material advantages, fear and defensiveness, the need for prideful aggrandizement. Another premise is that at birth, humans seek love, acceptance, and nurturance. And the last is only some people, those whose basic needs aren't met, become prejudiced. These are psychodynamics' three main principles. While researchers found eros and thanatos to be untestable in the 1930s, Dollard, Dube, Miller, Maurer, and Sears in 1939 reworked Freud's conclusions into the frustration-aggression hypothesis. The frustration-aggression hypothesis states that aggression is stimulated by external causes that lead to frustration. All aggression can be traced back to a situation that causes frustration. However, people are often inhibited from expressing aggression and so displace their aggression on someone weaker. Frustration may also lead to scapegoating, where an individual displaces their frustration on someone who has little to do with their frustration. Hovland and Sears in 1940 first showed this with African Americans lynchings in the South when economic downturns, lower cotton prices, resulted in an increase in attacks on African Americans. African Americans certainly had nothing to do with dipping cotton prices, as they were in the same boat as white cotton farmers, but the frustration and aggression were very real, and hence the lynching of African Americans. Researchers Adorno, Frankel, Breswick, Levinson, and Sanford in 1950 used Freud and the frustration-aggression hypothesis to explain the atrocities of the Holocaust. The researchers were able to identify a pattern of family experiences and personality traits that made select people susceptible to extreme prejudice. These individuals they referred to as high authoritarians. Their parents enforced strict discipline. The parents used harsh punishment. They have a great deal of respect for those above them. They had disdain for those below themselves in social hierarchy. High authoritarians tend to submit to authority. They adhere to conventional traditions and values. They think in rigid, all-or-nothing ways. Adorno and his colleagues were able to create a questionnaire to measure an authoritarian personality called the F scale. The scale measures level of obedience of the individual and their susceptibility to propaganda. The F scale was very revealing to researchers as they discovered that people who scored high on the scale displayed antipathy toward a large number of groups: African Americans, homosexuals, and elderly people. And I am doing this lecture on, what day is today? The 20th of November. And last night there was a shooting at a gay club, at a LGBTQ club in Colorado. And they're not exactly sure why the guy went in there and started blasting away at the patrons, but he took in a rifle, a AR-15, and started blasting away. And luckily, two people tackled him, and so he was only able to kill 5 and wound 18. That's as of right now. I just read the news release a couple minutes ago. Anyway, so that individual may be high on the F scale. There may be other reasons. He may not be anti-LGBTQ, but the probability is that he has something against people who are homosexuals. They were going to have a they were going to have a what do they call it? They were going to have a fashion show of sorts. The F scale fell out of favor in the 1960s as the scale seemed to bifurcate the world into prejudiced and non-prejudiced people, political conservatives and those who were more liberal. And of course, the conservatives were the ones who were the more prejudiced, and they were the more conservative people. However, Altmaier in 1981 used Adorno's work to identify an attitudinal cluster that identified a phenomenon that was more likely to support bias that he referred to as the right-wing authoritarianism. An inclination to submit to those of greater authority or status, general hostility toward deviants and members of other groups, a strong commitment to the traditional norms and values of one's group. And this may be what we are looking at in the United States. The Trumpian movement in the United States seems to be pointing in this right-wing authoritarian direction. Adorno and colleagues modeled their authoritarian personality after the parenting practices in Germany. But Altmaier's RWA could have been raised in any manner. They just see the world differently. It sees the social world as a dangerous and threatening place. They tend to be self-righteous about their own beliefs. Altmaier's RWA scale does not assess political attitudes, merely conservatism traits that could be held by either conservative or liberal, Democrat or Republican. Subsequent research by Duckett in 2006 has shown that people scoring higher on the RWA scale are more likely to show prejudice against ethnic minorities, women, disabled people, deviants, but particularly gays and lesbians. Research by Rowitz and Van Heil in 2011 found that these individuals applied stereotypes when evaluating members of other groups. One of the conclusions of prejudice research over time is that people who show prejudice against one group tend to be prejudiced against other groups. They're biased against difference from themselves. They fear people who are perceived as different from their traditional social standards. They dislike people who question their values or think in new ways. Research has shown that while there are those who are strongly biased, most people are most likely to be ambivalent about their feelings toward others. Humans are inherently social beings. We need others to help us interpret the world. We can only survive by coordinating our actions with others. Thus, people are controlled in groups by informal rules, standards, and expectations called group norms. And evidently, in this group norm, they have everybody wears that color of blue, and they have funny-looking hats and silver boots. It looks like they have silver boots. I can't remember. That's one of the airlines. That's their uniform. For much of the U.S. history, prejudice and discrimination were normative, and people were willing and able to display their biases openly. But with the civil rights legislation in the 1960s, bias was no longer a norm. But because of the need to norm, even well-intentioned people may act in biased ways by not preventing discrimination when they see it. Conformists are less open to new experiences and adamant about enforcing conventional standards. And what do we have here? We have everybody with a lighter colored outfit on, but we have two guys that are nonconformists. According to the social dominance theory by Sedanius and Prado in 1999, within all societies, groups are organized hierarchically, either by age, by sex, by ethnicity, by race, or by religion. Social hierarchy is motivated by basic group-based evolutionary processes, and prejudice beliefs are the result. Social hierarchy breeds looking for differences between status and groups. In almost all cultures, males and older individuals have more power than women and youth. In some cultures, dominant clans of tribes create hierarchies, while in other Christian or Muslim religions create the hierarchies. Social dominance theory purports that group hierarchy is normal and functional. Social dominance theory purports that societies are composed of group-based hierarchies. One group is dominant and maintains the positive assets, wealth, prestige, education, health. At least one group is subordinate and share negative consequences, poor health, poverty, and social stigma. Groups compete over scarce material and symbolic resources to enhance their own relative positions. Groups use ideological strategies such as those that support the national, racial, or ethnic superiority of their group, or political ideologies to limit the advancement of other groups perceived to be in competition. We blew up Alderaan for your freedom. If you don't like it, move to Endor. That's a Star Wars thing. Social dominance orientation refers to how much a person allows social dominance hierarchy to influence their behavior and attitude. People who score higher on social dominance orientation see intergroup relations as a zero-sum game where if one group wins, the other loses. Those in power tend to score higher on social dominance orientation scales. People who score high in social dominance orientation tend to be sexists, racists against any select minority, prejudiced toward immigrants, prejudiced toward lesbians, prejudiced toward gay men, prejudiced toward feminists, prejudiced toward housewives, prejudiced toward physically disabled people. Individuals in high social dominance orientation are likely to pursue careers as police officers and prosecutors. Individuals low in social dominance orientation are more likely to pursue careers as social workers and public defenders. When Barack Obama was elected president, the number of hate groups in the United States increased 25% to 1,018. White supremacy was the dominant position of these groups. They opposed immigration. They were opposed to the accommodation for non-Christian groups. What religion a person practices is not strongly predictive of the ways they think of diversity. How a person practices that religion does relate strongly to prejudices. People practice a religion for different reasons. Intrinsic religiosity is a deep commitment to the principles of their religion for the meaning it provides in their life. People who are high in intrinsic religiosity tend to be more invested in religious values and report lower levels of prejudice. For some people, their religion is important to them because it connects them with their community, it increases their social status, it increases their personal security. People high in extrinsic religiosity tend to express more prejudice. Unfortunately, people will use religion to promote their personal political agenda. They are aggressive toward others in the name of their religion. The European invasion of the Americas was done in the name of Christianity by all participants, the Brits, the French, and the Spanish. The connection between religion and prejudice is not simple. People who maintain a strong intrinsic religiosity tend to be more open to diversity. People who use religion as a social tool and need tend to be more prejudiced. Conservatives are motivated to uphold tradition, support systems that protect individual rights, reward individual achievements. Liberals are open to change, endorse systems that promote collective welfare, optimistic about human nature. Conservatives tend not to support diversity as much as liberals. They tend to support policies that restrict immigration, require immigrants to assimilate, oppose bilingual education. In the past, conservative principles have been used to justify prejudice and negative treatment of minorities. But of course, this is an oversimplification of a very complex topic. Ironically, when looking at the prejudices of both liberals and conservatives, their prejudices usually stem from a dislike of the other philosophy. Conservatives don't like groups because they are liberal. Liberals don't like groups because of their conservative bent. One problem in psychological research may be that only 6% of personality and social scientists identify themselves as conservative. This may skew the results and the topics being hypothesized. Research into liberal and conservative prejudices found that conservatives were more direct with their bias, while liberals were more subtle. According to Fisk in 1996, hostile sexism reflects openly negative attitudes toward women. Benevolent sexism is more subtle, characterized by seemingly positive attitudes toward women that restrict the roles of women through protective paternalism. And that is the end of chapter 4. So let's go on to chapter 5 and have more fun. Humans, Homo sapiens sapiens, have been able to survive in a hostile world because of two innovations. What are we talking about? What is this chapter about? Social cognition and categorization, distinguishing us from them. Okay. So Homo sapiens sapiens have been able to survive in a hostile world because of two innovations: the power of intellect, or the ability to understand our environment, and our ability to protect each other by living in social groups. Social cognition is a process by which we attempt to understand others, forming impressions, fitting our impressions into our worldview. We acquire information through attribution processes, viewing a situation and drawing conclusions from what we see. We integrate this information into what we already know, creating cognitive consistency. And if our perception or conclusions are flawed, then I can create a mindset that is inaccurate. That should be it. That it can create a mindset that is inaccurate. Cultural biases may exaggerate differences, skewing our social knowledge even further. We tend to maintain cultural biases as a means of mental shortcuts or generalizations that reduces the effort needed to read a situation. Allport in 1954 referred to humans as cognitive misers because of our proclivity to constantly use generalizations. And my grandson had a fifth grade basketball tournament yesterday, really fascinating. So there were people from all these tiny little communities around this area of Iowa. And it was really kind of interesting to watch these people because nobody knew anybody. There were about 5 communities there. There were 6 teams. And it was really fascinating to watch how each community tried to stay within themselves and they didn't want to talk to anybody else. It was really kind of curious. But my wife and I sat down in we were playing against Calamus Wheatland, and the people on our right were from Wheatland, and the people on our left were from Calamus Wheatland. So it was really kind of interesting. People were trying to be nice by not saying negative things about our team, and of course we were trying to do the same thing. We didn't want to say what a horrible play that was. That kid can't dribble, because it might have been their kid. Actually, we knew who they kept talking about these kids, so we knew exactly who they were. But it was really kind of fascinating, and we were in the Calamus Wheatland gym. So the assumption was that they were the home team and our team was the visitors. So they kept looking at the scoreboard, and that's the way they saw it. But it was actually the other way around, because it was just had to do with the draw. Anyway, it was really kind of fascinating. They thought they won by 1 point, and actually they lost by 1 point, which wasn't all that important. I mean, it wasn't really that big a deal. It really wasn't that big a deal, but what the big deal was that everybody got along so well. It was really kind of fascinating. Just watching people and watching people interact after the game. People didn't want to make eye contact with the enemy, with the them. So it was really kind of fascinating just to watch these people. I'll tell you, some of the people on our own team were pretty interesting too. They seemed more themy than the people from the other thems. It's really kind of fascinating. When we generalize, we limit our effort while maximizing our understanding of our environment. We have used new knowledge and incorporated it with our old knowledge, making us better prepared for new situations. The fundamental attribution error is that we attribute others' behavior to their disposition. They broke the law because they are evil. Anything that we do, on the other hand, is situational. Research by Pettigrew in 1979 discovered that people tend to attribute negative behaviors of outgroups as dispositional qualities and positive behaviors as externally caused. You don't know the fundamental attribution error, people like you just wouldn't understand. And that's of course, part of the fundamental attribution error. Okay. We seek to see the world as an understandable and predictable place. According to Lerner's 1980 Just World Hypothesis, people seek to see the world as a just place where people get what they deserve and deserve what they get. Just thinking that the world is a just place reduces people's stress. People who believe in a just world tend to be physically and psychologically healthier. Unfortunately, there are flaws in the just world hypothesis. Since bad things happen to bad people, this gives free rein to the individual to blame the victim if something bad happens to them. Blaming the victim is a serious flaw. Since humans evolved not knowing how or why people became mortally ill, evolutionary psychologists hypothesize that when an individual is confronted with someone with a disability, they shun them as if they might have a contagious disease. Some of the researchers have actually found that just being around a disabled person arouses existential fear of one's own death. And this was research done in 2005. After watching the American overreaction to the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, psychologists were not surprised when the 9/11 terrorist attacks engendered similar reactions. Overt displays of patriotism were such displays were rare, solidarity showing American values, dislike of others who seemed different. Cognitive dissonance is where an individual tries to maintain two conflicting thoughts in their mind at the same time. Researchers have discovered that when a situation causes excessive tension or anxiousness, people will try to rationalize the situation to reduce the tension. In order to keep the world consistent, sometimes people will make correlations between unrelated items that have little or nothing to do with one another. These are known as illusory correlations. A lucky token that gets a baseball player out of a slump, yeah, like that quarter that you put in your pocket has anything to do with you being able to hit the baseball. God must have found out what you did to my stamp collection. See, he dropped his ice cream cone and now he's crying, and it's God punishing him for doing something to this little girl's stamp collection. And that's illusory correlations. When our experiences are limited, we assume anything that is common goes in our known world, and anything that is rare goes into the other category. Therefore, we are more attuned to believe something strange about a rarely observed group. Because the information is novel, the individual spends more time thinking about it. I found this really kind of fascinating. This lady's eating a watermelon in a really strange way. This is in Romania, and she's Romanian, of course, but evidently that's the way they eat. That's the way they eat watermelon. Um, that's one way to do it, I guess. Oh, what am I talking about? Information is novel. The individual spends more time thinking about it. Yeah, there we go. Well, there's Batman. We've got three of them. All right. And there are Wonder Woman and Sailor Moon. We seek out information that confirms what we already know, and this is called confirmatory bias. Darley and Gross in 1980. Why did I have those pictures? Wait a minute, there must be a reason. When our experiences are limited, we assume anything that is common goes in our known world, and anything that is rare goes into our other category. Therefore, we are more attuned to believe something strange about a rarely observed group, like this lady that's what I don't really know about Romania, but I saw several pictures of people just chawing down on watermelon from Romania, so I assumed that was true. Maybe that's not true at all. Because the information is novel, the individual spends more time thinking about it. And of course, this is Comic-Con. They don't normally dress like that, I'm sure. These people, Sailor Moon and Wonder Woman and all the Bat people. we okay, so we've already talked about confirmatory bias. Darley and Gross in 1983 were able to show confirmatory bias when they demonstrated people seeking confirmatory information when identifying a student as either from a high or low socioeconomic situation. And of course, this is, I can't think of his name. Anyway, this is the bad kid from Harry Potter. And this is Harry Potter, who grew up in the closet of his aunt's house. And of course, he lived in a castle all of his life. I can't think of his name. Anyway, that's Harry. That's Harry. People with physical impairments are treated like helpless children. People with physical impairments were treated like they were a child when being given directions. People automatically think that elderly people are helpless. When speaking to a non-native speaker, people will use overly simple phrases spoken loudly with exaggerated intonation, and that should not be capitalized. The N should not be capitalized. I'm not really talking about American Indians, Native Americans, indigenous peoples of the Americas. I wasn't, so that should not be capitalized. That's the English teacher in my soul is coming out and telling you that. Others will react to our need for confirmatory consistency and bias by acting in ways that we expect and this is known as self-fulfilling prophecy. Treating someone as helpless will make them act helpless. This was demonstrated when researchers treated nursing home residents as either helpless or independent. Not only did the helpless group report feelings of depression and hopelessness, but their mortality rate was twice as high as the independent group. Levy et al. In 2009 researched early attitudes of people dealing with the elderly, and they discovered that people who felt that old age was a time of infirmity when they were young were more susceptible to life-threatening heart attacks and strokes when they became elderly. And I can tell you I'm 73 years old and I don't feel elderly. I don't feel like that. I certainly don't. I lift twice a week and, well, I'm bragging now, but I'm not like that, despite the fact I'm pretty old. 73. I'm 73. There's just too much information that people need to process and comprehend at any one time. Thus, we must simplify it to deal with it. We do this by categorizing things. We do this with people in society. It is called social categorization. Once this starts to happen, we find that people that we categorize are similar, and then we get blinded by that similarity. People tend to practice outgroup homogeneity. They see members of the same group as similar to each other. Exaggerate differences between in-group and out-group members. They feel closer to in-group members, of course. They perceive out-group members as less human. They value the lives of in-group members more than those of out-group members. People tend to think more deeply and in more detailed fashion about in-group members. They believe that in-group members share their attitudes, while out-group members have contrasting attitudes. They want to approach in-group members but avoid out-group members. They anticipate out-group members to be biased against them and value in-group members more when they are biased against the out-group. They are more helpful, cooperative, and generous with in-group members. Let me take a quick break. When we become part of a group, we start to think of the people in the group as not only similar, but part of ourselves. At some level, group and team members psychologically overlap. Researchers have detected that the areas of the brain reserved for thinking about yourself are activated when coming in contact with other in-group members. And this is really kind of curious because I've been an athlete most of my life. And when I'm on a team, I feel like the members of that team are my brothers. If it's a co-ed team, they're my brothers and sisters. Really kind of an interesting way of thinking. Some people don't have that strong feeling of kinship with the people that they compete with, the people that are on their team. And actually, I feel a kinship to the people I'm playing against as well. They're not the out group, they're a part of my group. They're a part of the people who play whatever it is that I'm playing, whether it's soccer or softball. It really didn't matter. Those were my people. That's how I felt. But then again, I wasn't raised to be different from everybody else. That my parents didn't tell us how different we were from this group or that group or another group. A lot of times, people are. How can I explain this? People are told, "Look, you're Methodist, so." You Methodist people are like us. Methodist people are like you. So you need to act like a Methodist person, and Methodist people will be more likely to be like you. And the people that are different, like Baptists and Catholics and Muslims and whatever, all of those people are so much different than you that you can't really trust them. So we weren't raised that way. We weren't raised in a church. We weren't raised as separate. We were raised to believe that we were part of a group, or not, or part that we weren't a group, that we were the same as everybody else. That's how we were raised. It's really kind of strange because most people are told, your people the people in our family are a lot smarter than everybody else, that kind of stuff. But I wasn't raised that way, so I never thought that way. And of course, when I came in contact with people. They were really surprised that, why, you're from Daleville, Indiana. You should act this way. Well, no, it doesn't matter where I was where I was raised. Just because I'm from Daleville doesn't mean that I'm going to be a Methodist, because that's the only church in Daleville is the Methodist Church. It's really kind of bizarre, and it was the same way with race. I played on a native softball team. I played on a Mexican softball team in when I was stationed at Lubbock, Texas. Really kind of curious. These guys were Mexican nationals, and they came up to work in the agricultural fields. And they were really nice people, just the nicest people ever. Anyway, almost everybody I've met have been really nice. It didn't really matter what group they were from or what ethnicity they were from. We lived in a black community in Washington, D.C. Actually, we were living in Maryland, just north of Washington, D.C. So and everybody just was everybody. It was the way it worked. Anyway, there's some Amish people. Okay, I was raised around the Amish. You want to talk about people that don't see other people as similar to them. That's the Amish. They call anybody that's not Amish English. They're the English because they speak English. The Amish speak German with each other, and that's their religious practices are in German. There's a bunch of they're Anabaptists, and Mennonites are that way, and Hutterites are that way. Moravians are that way. Anyway, it's not important. Interesting group. One of the problems with diversity is that many times it requires change, and change makes people feel uncomfortable. The world is less predictable, the world is less controllable. Our group is suddenly less secure because of change, and we just don't like that. Looks like they're having a good time on those rollerblades, though. In the United States, race is a central social category. Historically, race determined whether a person was free, what kind of jobs they could have, where they could sit on a bus, whom they could marry. However, in Germany, it is against the law to ask someone their race. Of course, Germany is a more homogeneous country. Almost everybody in Germany is German. In Japan, 95% of the population is Japanese. So you can imagine that anyway, how they feel about people that aren't Japanese in Japan. Hutus and Tutsis in Rwanda during 100 days of slaughter. 500,000 to a million people were killed in 1994. And why were they killed? They were killed because the Hutu and Tutsis had been at each other's throats for an extended length of time. This individual is a Tutsi and this individual is a Hutu. One of the differences that Tutsis are are a little bit taller, but as you can see, other than that, that's just about it as far as differences are concerned. But they butchered each other and for about 100 days. Everybody was afraid to go in because they didn't want to see the slaughter. It was a mess. And finally, the anger died down, and the Ugandan army moved in and separated the two groups. It's really ugly. Irish Catholics and Protestants in Northern Ireland between 1968 and 2001, 3,531 people were killed in the conflict between Catholics and Protestants in Northern Ireland. After Yugoslavia broke apart, the Serbs, Croats, and Bosnians fought a protracted war. They speak the same language, Serbo-Croatian, but practice three different religions. The Serbs are Orthodox Christians, the Croats are Catholics, and the Bosnians practice Islam. The war lasted for 3 years and 8 months, and 105,000 people died. Systematic rape was used in Bosnia, as ugly as all that is. The United States got involved. As a matter of fact, we still have peacekeeping forces in Bosnia, separating the Croats and the Serbs, and keeping them from attacking the Bosnians, as weird as that may seem. But they were using systematic rape of the women in order to befoul them and make them unreproducible or whatever. Somebody that you would not want to marry, as ugly as that is. One way to combat bias is to eliminate social categorizations. People can stop thinking of people as a member of a group and think of them only in terms of their individual qualities. People do this naturally with people close to them. Kartner and DeVidio in 2000 and 2009 suggest that we attempt to do it with everyone. Decategorization involves breaking down the concept of group boundaries and thinking of people in terms of individuals. One problem with decategorization is that it cannot be sustained for very long. However, it doesn't take long to get to know the individual in a process known as personalization. The common in-group identity model describes a process by which we change the way that we think about another individual's group membership. This can be done by switching a person from them status to we status. President Obama was able to do this by referring to Americans as our, us, and we. Recategorization does not always work. It doesn't eliminate bias, it merely redirects it. Studies with Germans after the wall came down showed that while East Germans identified with being Germans, it also increased their bias against people from other countries, as strange as that may seem. And of course, the wall came down in 1989. Now, as far as I'm concerned, see, I was stationed in Germany between 1979 and 1982 when the wall was still up, and we were still confronting not just the Russians, but also the East Germans in Germany. So this is very real to me, but 1989, that was how long ago? That was 33 years ago. So most of you weren't even born when this took place. But as far as I'm concerned, this is very, very real. Turned out that the East Germans really didn't like immigrants coming into Germany, especially from Eastern Europe and from the Middle East. So they were very prejudiced. A second problem is getting groups to accept a common identity. Efforts to induce a common identity can be met with resistance that in turn can increase bias between members of the original group. Recategorization can cause a group to reject their less inclusive group identities. Another problem with recategorization is that people who are more collectivist, American Indians, do not seek to be seen as different from the group identity. Their identity as a tribal member is far more important to them to be seen as separate and acceptable to anyone who would see them as different. Now, I've got a video right here. This is a song from the 1970s, I think, Procol Harum. It's not one of my favorite songs, but if I put it in my lecture, they will. It's copyrighted, so they will label my my lecture in copyright violation. So please go back and listen to this song. It's really kind of fascinating. And that's the end of chapter 2, or chapter 5, I guess. More about that. So diversity, a lot of diversity has to do with the idea that everybody's the same. But the reality is, of course, you guys don't want to be the same as everybody else. You want to be identified as Dene people, and that's logical. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. And it's the same way with African Americans and people of Hispanic heritage. They don't want to be known as just American. Some of them do. Some people don't want to be seen as different. But the reality is we're proud of our heritage, and that makes a lot of sense. That's known as multiculturalism. And sometimes we get in this argument about what's more important, multiculturalism or diversity. And the answer, I feel, as a psychologist, I feel that multiculturalism makes a lot more sense. It honors people for their ancestry, and it also honors people as individuals. Let me get rid of this one. We'll go to the last one. This is social identity roles and relations, motivational influences and responses to diversity. So let's see what we get here. According to Hong in 2010, the stronger you identify with a group, the more you see yourself as a typical member of that group, and identify typical by your own behavior. You become the prototype for the group, in your own mind, of course. Everyone maintains two identities: their personal identity, that which makes us unique, and our social identity, an identity you share with others, but only the special groups that you belong to and care about. There you go, social identity and personal identity. Some people identify more strongly with their group than others. The stronger someone identifies with the group, the harder they will work for the group. The more strongly they will adhere to norms and values of the group, the more affected they will be by the successes and failures of the group. The more reluctant they are to abandon their connection to the group. And this is a Colts fan. And as you can see, he is the super fan. And he is covered with Colts stuff. Anyway, there's the horse, the blue horse. Okay. And there he is at home. People can lose their personal identity if they have too strong an identity with the group. They can become fused to the group. The self and group become indistinguishable. The group's values become who the individual sees themselves as being. Most people find long-term fusion with a group unsatisfying after a while. People seem to need to distinguish themselves from others and establish a unique identity from family and from a group. And this is one of the reasons why teenagers tend to leave home. They want to go someplace else to go to college. They need their own identity. They need to just establish their own identity. I know when I was growing up, I was the fourth of six children. So I had three brothers and I had a brother and two sisters before me who came before me, and a lot of times the teachers would call me by my brother's name because they saw Bradway and they were thinking, "Oh, it's Johnny's little brother," and they would say John. They would call me John instead of my name, which is Bruce. A lot of difference between the two. It's a good thing my mother didn't name us with similar names. I never would have had an identity of my own. But of course, we were all different. I had one sister that didn't go to college. I had one sister that was brilliant, but got married her freshman year of college. My brother was Purdue all the way, so I had to be different. I went to Wabash, which is very, very different. Not like everybody else in the family. My sister went to Ball State. We were from Muncie. The optimal distinctiveness theory argues that people have simultaneous and competing drives for both distinctiveness and inclusiveness. We all have a level of inclusiveness that we are comfortable with. For example, people who live in cities seek excessive amounts of we-ness. They want to be just like the people in Chicago, or just like the people in the city. My sister raised her family in Chicago, and they were very, very cognizant of the fact that they wanted to be people from Chicago. And if somebody was from Schaumburg or one of the suburbs of Chicago, and they called themselves from Chicago, they would get really upset with them for calling themselves from Chicago. But because to be from Chicago, you had to live in Chicago. You had to have a Chicago address. When an individual reaches a peak level of we-ness, they may seek more accentuation of their individuality by balancing their personal and social identity. We all do different things with different groups, and in each group we will maintain different identities. As a matter of fact, we can bounce back and forth between different identities, and this is according to social identity theory. We not only act differently, but think and feel differently. How we are going to raise the children. Oh, that's okay. All right. Okay.
Hang on a second. Loop quantum gravity clearly offers more testable predictions than string theory.
I'm listening. Amuse me.
Okay, well, for one thing, we expect quantized spacetime to manifest itself as minute differences in the speed of light for different colors.
Balderdash. Matter clearly consists of tiny strings.
Are you gonna let him talk to me like that?
Okay, well, there's a lot of merit to both theories.
No, there isn't. Only loop quantum gravity calculates the entropy of black holes.
Sheldon, don't make that noise. It's disrespectful.
I should hope so. It was a snort of derision.
You agree with me, right? Loop quantum gravity is the future of physics.
Sorry, Leslie. I guess I prefer my space stringy, not loopy.
Well, I'm glad I found out the truth about you before this went any further.
Truth? What truth? We're talking about untested hypotheses. It's no big deal.
Oh, it isn't? Really? Tell me, Leonard, how will we raise the children?
I guess we wait until they're old enough and let them choose their own theory.
We can't let them choose, Leonard. They're children.
Wait, where are you going?
I'm sorry. I could have accepted our kids being genetically unable to eat ice cream or ever get a good view of a parade. But this is a deal breaker.
Wow, okay. Okay. In 1967, the Supreme Court struck down anti-miscegenation laws that had been in place in most of the southern states since 1776. And these are the southern states that had miscegenation laws. Miscegenation laws had to do with the fact that white people couldn't marry or have babies with black people. That was the rule. That was the law. And of course, if it happened, then somebody got in trouble. Wait a second.
Stream 85 plus live channels with no hidden fees. YouTube TV. Try it free.
No idea why that's there.
Apple
come
TV
on.
Sizzling Skillets, starting at just $10.99.
Sorry about that.
Sorrow, I've seen trouble. Hot damn! This is Soccer Bottom Boy. I have bid farewell to old Kentucky, the plains where I was born and raised, the place where he was born and raised. Morning. These boys are a hit. We're happy. They's integrated. Minute. So I guess don't mind these independents. You miscegenated. All you boys is miscegenated. Give me a microphone. Oh, give me a microphone. Give me a microphone. These boys is not white. these boys is not white. Hell, they ain't even old-timey. Look, I happen to know, ladies and gentlemen, that this band of miscreants here this very evening interfered with a lynch mob in the performance of its duty. Well, it's true. See, I belong to a certain secret society. I don't believe I gotta mention its name, you know. And these boys here, they trampled all over our venerated observances and rituals. Now, this here music is over, all right? And I ain't folks, listen to me. These boys desecrated a fiery cross. And they convicts, folks, fugitives escaped off the farm. Now, folks, these boys gotta be remanded the authorities. Criminal. And I have it from the highest authority that Negro sold his soul to the devil. Oh. Wait a minute now, folks. No, it's true. It's true. Wait a minute, folks. Is you ain't my constituency. Is you ain't my constituency. Is you ain't my constituency. Oh, come on, folks. No, it's over now. Come on, I'm a friend of the new man.
YouTube
Yay!
TV has no hidden fees and includes unlimited DVR space. YouTube.
Okay. Anyway, that's what miscegenation is. Miscegenation is a law against interracial marriage and reproduction. That's what miscegenation means. It is predicted that by 2050, 20% of Americans will be either biracial or multiracial. Tajfel and Turner in 1979 identified an individual's need to accentuate the positiveness of their group by differentiating themselves from outsiders. People who have the need to acknowledge as much difference as possible between a group they belong to and one that they don't. We can use one of three strategies to enhance our social identity. Social mobility, leave one social group for one that is more positively valued. Social creativity, and competition. We can use one of three social mobility, social creativity. We can seek positive distinctiveness by emphasizing a different basis for social comparison from the one that defines a social relationship, one in which the in-group appears superior. Competition, winning in any contest, will enhance positive feelings. This feeling is known as Schadenfreude. Schadenfreude, the pleasure derived from someone else's pain. It's a German word. Each individual joins a group and seeks to fulfill the ideal or prototypical identity of that group, and that is by thinking in the right way. This sense of solidarity and like-mindedness makes the individual feel secure. Those groups make the individual feel that they can deal with the complexity of the world. Needing to feel the right way can lead people into joining extremist groups where the group is tightly organized, the rules are clear and rigid, the membership is homogeneous, there is a strong sense of mission, and leadership is charismatic. Attempting to simplify your life promotes eccentric motivations. It is much easier to maintain dislike for a group than to get to know them, to individuate them. This leads to competitiveness, discriminatory behavior, and exploitative intergroup relations. What's the joke? Since I am only back for a little, I I have to spend my time in California wisely. We have to go to Trader Joe's. They don't have them in Colorado. They don't have Trader Joe's in Colorado. Oh no, Jamba Juice either. Land of tasty food is California, and all the rest of the United States is a wasteland. Okay, that's a joke. Haslam and Riker in 2007, looking at the atrocities of the Holocaust, determined that it wasn't extreme conformity or blind obedience, as was proposed by Milgram experiment, but a strong sense of identification with the Nazi Party. The Nazi Party invited the people of Germany to join their group identity through the hatred of Jews, homosexuals, evangelical Christians, gypsies, the Romani, the disabled, rare children with African ancestry. One of the places where diversity has played a great deal of lip service is in college and university classrooms. But not only is the student body rarely representative of the population in general, but the faculty tends to be more liberal and secular than the general population. Living in large societies makes individuals... Is that a picture of mine? Wait a second. No, that's not. I'm not there. Okay. I thought this maybe was one of the faculty groups that I worked in. Living in large societies makes individuals susceptible to blaming the victim. It is much easier to empathize with an individual than with an entire faceless people. Research by Small et al. In 2007 demonstrated that an image of a single individual induces a greater empathy than that of many individuals. The idea was that whole-scale suffering causes psychic numbing. Small and colleagues in 2007 found that when they showed many children starving in Africa, people didn't respond to it as readily as the sight of one child starving in Africa. People tend to make assumptions about people from different roles that members of the group occupies. They feel that secretaries are all female, about 96%. Firefighters are all male, about 96%. Mechanical engineers are male, 93%. Elementary school teachers are female at 82%. Wait staff are female at 71%. And construction workers are all male at 97%. Because men's roles were to obtain protein resources in the form of meat and protecting the group from predators, it is thought that men gained a hierarchical advantage over women. Stereotypes become proscriptive. They not only describe what groups look like, but they begin to be interpreted as what they should be like. So male domination in society became seen as a natural course of things rather than an anecdotal phenomenon. Thus, when women stayed in their place, they were seen as models of proper behavior, and when they don't, they are shunned. When women challenge the system, they are viewed as the opposite of the stereotype, cold and non-nurturing instead of warm. Really kind of interesting because right now I'm reading a book called Code Girls. It's about the women who they enlisted to break the German and Japanese codes during World War II. Because most of the men were overseas, they recruited thousands of women to come in and become cryptanalysts and to break the codes. And of course, part of the problem was the stereotype. Before this, in the 1920s and 1930s and early 40s, women were thought of as homemakers with very little intellect. But what they needed was women with a lot of intellect. So all of a sudden, they needed to go and recruit these women from colleges. But of course, in the 1930s, most colleges were all male colleges. There weren't that many women's colleges or co-ed colleges in the United States. So they were struggling to find women who could do this, or at least they thought they were going to struggle. And what they found were a lot of very brilliant women who almost single-handedly broke the German and Japanese codes. And because of their ability to break the codes, they were able to turn the tide by discovering what the Japanese and the Germans were doing, where they were going to have supplies and whatnot, where they were going to attack, where the submarines were. All of those things added to the defeat of the Germans and the Japanese during World War II. It wasn't the only thing, of course, but it added to the complete defeat of both the Japanese and the Germans. Biology is not destiny. In a world where food can be easily obtained and it doesn't require raw strength to protect the family, male and female dichotomy becomes less extreme. Currently in the United States and much of the world, traditional social roles have become unimportant. Most social role changes have taken place fairly slowly, but the changes that have taken place are difficult to reverse. Mindsets have also been changed, and this evolutionary process will take another glacial movement to change back. One thing that has changed back is that they've outlawed abortion in the United States, or allowed the states to determine whether abortion will be illegal or not. Of course, this had been a right since the 1970s, and now, of course, we have gone back in that direction. I guess that glacial movement actually took place. Women in combat is another change. There are women who are training to be Navy SEALs and to be Army Rangers. Evolutionary change in social roles takes place, but rapid, more revolutionary changes can also take place. The election of the first African American president, Barack Obama, not only changed political social roles for African Americans, but social and educational aspirations among young African Americans as well. My wife was telling me yesterday that in the last election, the 4 largest cities in the United States elected black female mayors. Black female mayors. She's behind me. She gave me the right answer. Houston, Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York all have black female mayors now. Objectification and social role advancement, and of course, you can look at this. These are objectification advertisements that objectify women. Advertisers objectify women by placing them in sexual and compromising poses more frequently than men. They are also more likely to show décolletage or the full body of a woman, while men tend to just include their faces. Research has shown that when women self-objectify, they are less likely to perform well either academically or socially. And of course, you would never see a picture like this of a male. Whoops, I'm going backwards. There we go. And when I talk about décolletage, I'm talking about the gap between a woman's breasts. And of course, both of these advertisements are using the woman's décolletage to draw a man's focus on the woman, objectifying women. Whoops, I'm going the wrong direction. There we go. While change is possible, the greatest pressure is always to maintain society as it is, maintain the status quo. According to system justification theory, people seek to maintain positive feelings about themselves, their groups, and society in general, and the current social order. People of high status obviously seek to maintain the current system because of their position in the system. Disadvantaged groups will also support the current social system, even accepting negative stereotypes in order to support the system. They do this because they know their place in the society and are more comfortable with a known negative than a possible unknown positive. How one group responds to another group depends on whether the group is seen as beneficial or harmful. Seeing a group as a competitor arouses bias, This can lead to discrimination, which can result in open conflict. Realistic threats are threats that another group will harm one's health or threaten their resources. After 9/11, many Americans felt threatened and so came out against immigration. The fear is that immigrants will take American jobs. They are a criminal element. They will spread dangerous diseases. The other kind of threats are symbolic threats. Symbolic threats enter the realm of values and beliefs, so these attacks would deal with values and culture. Symbolic threats engender as strong a bias as realistic threats. As a matter of fact, symbolic threats cause just as much conflict and are more difficult to find compromise because they're dealing with ideas and symbols. And of course, examples of that would be all the religious wars that have taken place over the last millennia. Whoops, going the wrong direction again. Sometimes there is no clear-cut good and evil. These types of conflicts are difficult to resolve because there is no obvious side to help. Yet the conflicts continue to cause the usual bias and discrimination until it gets to open conflict. A superordinate is a thing that represents a superior order or category within a system of classification. In conflict resolution, a superordinate goal is a goal that both sides can agree on and both sides can work towards. The two movies Remember the Titans and Glory Road are about disparate groups coming together for a common goal. And of course, this is a picture from Remember the Titans. Oh, and that is the end of the lecture. So I have one more lecture, and I'm going to talk about the women's movement and socioeconomic status, I think. Yeah, socioeconomic status next week. So there you go. I was supposed to get a video by Dr. Ami, but she hasn't sent it to me yet. I'll see if I can get that in next week's lecture. It's a short video. She's trying to recruit you to get a minor in Native American Studies. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys next week.